So what we're going to do next is we are going to be working on our basting stitches. Basting stitches have what? They are temporary. They have no knots. No knots. So we're going to cut off this knot. I'm going to kind of just dust all the bits I don't need off to the side. Later I will scoot those straight into a trash bin. Okay, so I have no knots, no knots. I have it so that it is, the tail goes to a little bit past halfway of my thread. What we're going to work on is thread marking and flatlining. So the first one we're going to start with, look, la. Since according to the packets I gave you guys, the first one that is shown is even basting. And for those who don't have, who didn't have it in front, I'm going to see if I can lift this up and put it under here. So this is for even basting. And as you can say, even basting is for flatlining specifically, okay? So even basting is basically a running stitch. And it is going to be off the line. I'm just going over what we're going to be doing. We're going to actually start with thread marking because it's on the line. It's a little easier to follow. It helps to train your hands to stitch straight. So for flatlining, your stitches are going to be about 1/4 to 1/2 inch, and that's for the whole thing. So it all looks very even. And you're going to be marrying the two of these together. Okay, so this says secure with 1 back stitch, and you can, but for our purposes, we're not going to do that. Okay, so there's that one, and then and the stitches will be even once again. See, they'll even. And then the other one is for uneven basting stitches, which looks like this. It looks like that. It has it going through both. I tend to have you guys only do 1 stitch at a time, so it helps to train your eye. Okay. So the thing about this one, this is for thread marking. This is uneven basting stitches. And so uneven basting stitches is a long stitch underneath and small ones on top when we're looking at it. So here, that's how we're going to do it. We are going to start, sorry guys, still figuring out cords and stuff. We are going to start with thread marking, okay? So I'm going to flip this around so I can see it. Thread marking, okay? So if you're a righty, you're going to start from the right. If you're a lefty, you'll start from the left. And you're going to point your needle going that way, all right? Lefties will point their needle going this way, okay? Going from this side. So when you get ready to stitch, we are going to rotate this a little bit. There we go. I like to try and keep my fabrics flat. Thread marking is not so bad because the more you handle it when you're marrying two things together, the more it can move. But we've pinned these. I also like to keep it on my table because then I can really see where my stitches are happening. So every single stitch, I'm just going to show you in the middle so you can see. Every single stitch should be, oh, why isn't it focusing? Come on, focus on me. Let me see if I bring this down, if this helps. It helps a little bit. Okay, so we'll do it this way. I can rotate this as needed. So when we stitch, when we take the needle and we put it in, it can go at an angle, that's fine. But you need to always see the eye of the needle and the point of the needle. They should always be top side whenever you are sewing. On sewing really just about anything. The exception is sometimes the button. It's a fairly rare occasion if I don't have my needle point and the eye of my needle on the top. It will help you to know exactly how long your stitches are going to be, and so it's a good practice to have. Okay, so we are going to do thread marking. So I'm going to start down here, and I'm going to start on the end. And I'm going to go in and out. I like to actually look at my needle, and I'm going to probably go about half the length of my needle. I have a fairly small needle. So I'm going to start on the end. I'm going to go about halfway. Okay. like that. I can go ahead and pull my pin out. And I'm going to put my pin into my tomato. Okay? So then you're going to pull that. When you pull it, you can kind of hold it down, especially if you deal with more than more than one layer. And I'm going to leave a pretty decent tail, and I want you to see that. See, I'm pulling it by the thread, or I'm holding it at the eye, so I'm holding onto the thread and the needle. If you just pull the needle, you're going to pull your needle out every single time you sew, and we don't want that, okay? Make it easier, right? So I'm just going to pull my thread so that I have a nice tail. When you're first starting out, you might want to leave that tail a little long, and that's okay, so you don't accidentally over pull it. I also want to make sure that that thread is laying nice and calm and not being pulled too tight, and I'll show you what happens if you do that. Okay, so I'm staying on the line. Now, the length underneath, I go down and I come up when I'm about halfway length. Now, where I go back in is going to be close to where I came out. So I am going close to where I came out. Note how long that is. And then I'm coming back up. Okay? See? And then when I pull that, and I like to hold my stitches. The previous one, it kind of keeps me from accidentally pulling them too tight. And see, now you have a little tiny stitch on the top, and if you flip it over, you will see the long stitch on the back. All right? So then I'm going to keep doing that. Now, for those of you who are having a really hard time, you can take a measuring tape and mark, an inch, so you know to come out right before that mark. But learning how to do it by eye is probably the best thing to do. Once again, I came out here. I'm going to go in close to it. I'm going to go about halfway. I'm going to hold that down. Okay, see what that does? I've got my next little stitch. And they are evenly set apart. Okay, so if I flip this over, they look like uniform stitches. Uniform to this side, uniform to the other side. So we're going to do that again. I came out here, now I'm going to go in here. And I'm using my finger, I'm lifting with my needle, and I'm using my other finger to keep the tension on this end so that I can lift it up and get it to come out, all right? So that one ended up a little short. And when I'm just starting, I also would look at my distance, you get better the more you do it. Okay, see? Nice little prick stitch, all right? So where I came out, I'm going to stay close to where I came out. And remember, for the differences between thread marking and flatlining, as you can see, we sew on the line. This is right on that line. We are doing uneven stitches, so this side does not look like the other side if you were to flip them over. This side looks like tiny little stitches. This side looks like long stitches, okay? And then you also want to have a different color thread. I will be using a different color thread for flatlining as well because I want you to be able to see the difference of what those stitches actually look like, okay? So, moving on, I'm close to where I came out. I'm going in. I'm going to stitch it, come up right on my line, and if I get it wrong, it's okay. I just take my needle out and I try again. Okay, on that line. So I don't want to fight my pin, so I go ahead and take my pin out, put it in my pin cushion, and I'm once again holding it here. So since I'm not too far, I'm going to show you what happens if you pull it too tight. If your tension, when I talk about the tension being too tight, I'm going to try and hold it on this side so it doesn't, when you pull it too tight, you see how it puckers up like that? It's got these puckers. That's a sign that your tension's too tight. So you kind of need to run your finger over it, help it relax. You don't want that. It will create problems, especially when you're doing slip stitch and whip stitch, okay? So we're just going to keep going. Close to where I came out, I'm going to go back in. Slide, using my finger, I'm pressing with the needle to come back up. Then I'm putting my finger right behind it, but not holding down your loop. Okay, so if it starts to like twist and wants to like try and knot itself up really badly, then I would take and unknot it before it becomes a big problem. You want to keep your thread being happy as you're sewing. Don't just let it go, or you're going to have a really hot, messy mess. Okay, going back in, close to where I came out, and pulling that thread. Okay, and keep on going. We're going to go all the way to the end. So even if you've messed up, it's okay. It's sometimes good to see where we went wrong or made a slight mistake. It helps us to evaluate where we need to improve. So don't stress about it. Just keep pushing forward. Worry about remembering how to do it and knowing that this is thread marking with uneven basting stitches. Okay? And I'm doing this with you so that you know how long it's going to take as well. I'm not trying to sew it any faster. I'm actually sewing very, very slow for you guys. Because normally I'd probably be done already. But I've been doing this for a long time. And I'm also trying to make sure I do it really beautiful and perfect. Okay. Woohoo. I will also try and take a picture of the resources that I sent home with you guys so you have an electronic version of it. And I will also take a picture of the grade sheets for your see, that's causing me a problem to be able to do that properly. So go ahead and take that pin out so you can know what you're being graded on for these. Okay. Now there are some things that are not listed on that grade sheet because sometimes, you know, we have things that happen that don't happen with every single person. So just be aware. Okay. Oops. Look, I unthreaded my needle, but that's okay. We're going to go ahead and use our needle threader. It got caught on a piece of my mat. There we go. Settled. Making sure I still have plenty of space. Okay. So now, where it came out, close to where we go in. And just so you know, I'm also doing this with a camera slightly in my way, so I apologize. This is also causing me to go a little slower. It's okay. So using my finger, I like to do this flat. And then once you've got the hang of it, you can do it really quickly. You can even do it in your hand, depending on what you're what you're thread marking. If you're thread marking a suit piece for someone, you're going to want to keep that flat. Because the more you hold it in your hands, the more the wool will stretch and do things. Okay, so close to where I came out. Going back in. And then there we go. Uh-oh, that's causing me some problems, so I'm going to take that out, and it's okay. We're good. Just to make sure it's laying flat. See how I keep missing the line? That's why I keep pulling it out and put it back in. And I'm going to pull it a little bit so that my thread tail is a little bit, and I'm just pulling on my needle a little bit, and it makes that tail get out of the way. Okay? And this one's going to be my last stitch. And I'm going to shorten that one because it's the very end. Okay? There we go. So there we go. There we have it. All right? And then we're going to just clip. So we have somewhat of a tail. All right? So that is thread marking. All right? So as you can see, smaller on this side, but longer on the back side. And you can see that line really clearly. So if this was a hem of a skirt, I'd be like, oh yeah. And then I could just take it and I could take it to the iron and fold it on that line. And press it. I would finger press it first. Okay? So that's why we have thread marking for hems of things. Okay? So next we're going to work on flatlining. Okay, so now what we want to do is we are going to be working on flatlining. That's the one that we use to marry two pieces of fabric together. Okay, I did thread marking first because I wanted you to practice sewing a straight line, and now we're going to kind of follow next to the straight line. Okay, so once again, first thing you want to do is usually if you cut it right, you should have enough to go the length of this piece of fabric. It should be at least at 16 inches. As long as you have, see how I've got mine doubled up right now? Mine's a little, I need to lengthen it. Mine is about the length. So I can now, holding on to this piece, I'm going to hold on to just my needle to pull that tail away from where I'm going to be, where the end is. Okay? So here we go. Now, thread marking, once again, thread marking was on the line. The stitches are uneven, and the thread color is a different color, so we can see it. That's our showboat girl. That's our showgirl. She wants to walk that runway and show off the bed. She wants to be seen. Okay. Flatlining is shy. It's kind of like a ninja. It doesn't want to be seen. It doesn't want to be on the line because if it's into the seam allowance when we actually sew on this line, you won't see it. We're going to do even stitches because we don't want to do anything really fancy. And we're going to make sure that typically we would use the same color thread. So because my fabric has a white background, normally I would use a white. But so that you can see it, so you can see what I'm doing, I'm going to use my lovely pink that I have here. Okay? So the first thing you're going to do is we're going to start the same way that we started thread marking. But instead of being on the line, I'm going to be just off the line. Okay? If you do it about here, you're really good. If you do it out here, no. Don't do it. It's defeating the purpose of what a flatlining is for. It's to marry these two pieces together until we can temporarily, so that we can get them through the sewing machine. So we want to stay kind of close to your line, all right? So being close to my line, I'm going to, see how that pin's getting on my nerves? I'm going to move that out of the way because I don't need it. All right, so make sure you don't have any bubbling. Once again, I like to use that half Z point. Okay, you can use the width of a finger even. So I pulled that through and I've got my tail. Make sure you've got a good tail. Okay, so sometimes you can use a pinky or make a couple marks. So I know that this one is there. Make that one there. So I'm going to make sure I am parallel, and then I'm going to go down, and I'm going to come back up. I'm going to make sure that if I look at it before I pull it through, I can tell I'm a little bit off in the angle of my needle. So I need to redo that point, rotate it a little bit. See? Still crooked. All right, we're going to try this again. Okay. Thinking too hard about it. Sometimes it's a matter not just thinking about it, just do it. Today I'm having a little anxiety, I suppose. Okay? So you see how that's a little more straighter? It's a little more straighter. Not as good as I would like. I'm going to try one more time. I don't know what's going on with me. Okay. So here to here. Boop. Looking at it. There we go. That's better. So I do a check of it before I continue, okay? So I'm making sure, does that match up to that? Does that match up to that? Okay? It's a little shorter, but that's okay. We're going to keep going. Part of this is training your eyes to see the difference, okay? Okay. There we go. So making sure I'm kind of holding it with my nail where that is. See, that's getting in my way, so I'm going to take it out. So then it helps me to see my distances. Okay. The first time around is also a little nerve-wracking because when you're learning how to do it, your anxiety goes up a little bit. Just know that that's okay. That's normal. But see, if I flip this over, it looks the same whether I'm looking at this side or that side with the length of stitch. That's why it's called an even stitch. Okay. Continuing. There. I'm keeping my needle parallel to the line. So all of our stitching, your needle will usually either be held, majority of the time, parallel or perpendicular to your stitch line. Or your fold, rather. You can get later on. See, look at that. Look, we're doing a thing. We're doing a thing, guys. Let's do this. Okay. And you can watch this video as many times as you need to. There is no shame. Everything is a learned skill, especially in costume land. See how that kind of came out? Because I didn't hold on to my thread. There's that. See? You see why I hold it? And boop. And boop. Also getting in my way. You can also pin it perpendicular if you really want to. Sometimes I do, depending on what I'm trying to get stitched. Yeah, we're almost done. It looks like I just have this one stitch left. Okay. See that? Look at that. Looks the same on this side as it does on this side. All right. Those stitches look the same. The stitches are also the same distance from your stitch line, okay? The same distance from the stitch line. And typically, like I said, this would be in the same color thread as your fashion fabric, as my fashion fabric. So if this was a bright, bright pink, that'd be golden, right? If it's white, I would usually use a white, okay? So when we stitch on the actual line of this piece, if we stitched on the line, you would not even see any of this flat lining we just did. Okay, no knots. Make sure you also go to the end. See how I've got this? I'm going to pull my needle. I can pull my needle out because I'm going to have to rethread anyway. Put my needle where I won't lose it. And I'm going to clip my excess tails. And this is what you will be taking a picture of for your submission of flatlining and thread marking. Okay, you'll take a picture of the front, and you'll take a picture of this back. Okay? All right, there you go. Thread marking, flatlining, all done. Go us. All right, I'll see you guys soon to do our probably whatever next one we decide to do.